People who are wrestling with questions about faith, God, Christianity, what would you say is like a good next step for them on kind of figuring that out for themselves?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing I would almost say is to those of us who maybe have grown up in the church or who are used to being insiders, and we've forgotten how a lot of the things that we believe in our faith to an outsider are sort of foreign, and you know, just ideas like, well, I've heard the Trinity thing, is it three gods, is it one? And those are sort of very fundamental questions, very deep questions that are important to ask. God wrote the Bible, but wasn't it human beings that scribed it? Wasn't this just a letter to a church? What's that all about? Things that we take for granted that the Path Group allows to be discussed in a very open kind of way. For those who are struggling in their faith or who have doubts, I think a lot of times we wrongly assume that doubts or questions or a wrestling with God and faith are opposed to each other. What I would say to encourage somebody in that place is a couple of things. Number one, the faith that we inherited as Christians came from the Hebrew faith, the Israelite nation. And the name of that people as Israelites comes from this man, Israel, whose name was changed from Jacob to Israel because he wrestled with God. Our faith is actually born out of a wrestling with God. In fact, the people who are so certain about all the answers, I begin to, internally at least, question the authenticity of their faith. Because a lot of what we see even in the Psalms, for instance, is this very authentic and raw faith. Most of those were written by King David, and many of them are psalms of lament where he's shaking his fists at the heavens and he's going, I know these things to be true about you. I know your character and your eternal nature, and I know your word, and I know what you've done in the past, but my current reality, these just ridiculous circumstances, my enemies are pressing in, and you see a lot of the rawness of the faith beginning to ask a question. The key difference for him being a man of faith is that he was doing that in the presence of God. His audience in those Psalms were God himself. And so you'd often see this sort of dichotomy of this very profound and raw wrestling, these questions of faith. And if anybody could be allowed to ask those kinds of questions, it would be a man after God's own heart, King David. And so I think these things show us that to live an authentic faith, which is the vision of Sandals Church, there are going to be moments in life, there are going to be circumstances, things that happen, relationships that are jacked or broken or that end, sickness that happens, that if we're honest in our humanity, we're going to have some questions for God. And that's actually okay. He can handle those. It's not his first rodeo. He's been there and he's heard those things before. And he just actually wants to invite us into that space of doing that in his presence and before him, instead of running away from him.
So what are path groups at Sandals Church?
So path groups are a 9-week conversational small group that allows people to have a safe space to ask any kind of question they have about the Christian faith. Really, the people that we're looking to invite to these kind of groups are people who are either not yet in the faith, but they're interested. Maybe they've been to Sandals Church and they're like, oh, I don't know, this is what church was like. And their interest is piqued and they want to know a little bit more. Or maybe they sense something stirring within them that causes them to start asking certain questions or begin to be curious about it. But they haven't yet committed their life to God or said, I'm a follower of Jesus yet. So that's the first category. The second category are people who have crossed over that line of faith and said, yes, I'm in and I believe. But I don't have a foundation. I don't have sort of the basics of the faith. I need to really get some questions out there and have a space where I can not feel ashamed or judged because is this a dumb question? There are no dumb questions in a path group, and so and that's the second category. Let's call those just people who are new to the faith. And then finally, people who are returning. Maybe like so many of us were born and raised in the faith, and somewhere along the way we got disillusioned, we were jaded by faith for whatever reason, and then eventually later in life we begin to come back and we begin to wonder, I need a refresher. I need to sort of retool my foundation, if you will.